Hi there, it's Stephanie. Here's an interactive scrolling text box that you may want to include in your e-learning courses. This has been published out and you can see the result. As I'm speaking, you can see that it's in motion. It's just basically highlighting a point on the right-hand side, and as that point is highlighted, information is appearing on the left-hand side that's specific to it. So here's item 1, it's a blue background, item number 2 has a red background, and so on and so forth. So I can just kind of passively look at this information as it cycles by, or I can interact with it by clicking on any of the buttons to jump directly to a point. So if I want to go back and see point number 1, I can just click that button. It's going to take me back to point 1 or point number 2 and so on and so forth. So I like this for an e-learning interaction because it replaces potentially bullet lists, and that's actually why I created it, so that I wanted to have some information that was supporting information, kind of reinforcing points, and I wanted to do that in a way that was a little unusual and a little bit more fun for the students, so that, you know, also giving them the option. Either they can just sit back and watch, or they can interact and review themselves at their own pace. So let me show you how I did this. Over in PowerPoint, you can see that there are 5 slides. The first slide is what we're looking at, and that contains the entire interaction with all the different points. All 4 points are in this slide. The other slides are a subset of that. So, and that was used to hyperlink. Basically, the buttons are just hyperlinking to these slides. So when I clicked on the blue button, all that did was actually hyperlinked over to slide number 2. Slide number 2 contains a very simple animation, and you can see it brings in just the very first point. Slide number 3, a little more complicated because it has to fade out the first point and then bring in the second point. So if I play that, you can see that that's exactly what's happening, and the remaining points are set up the same way. So it's just the individual points themselves that are on the subsequent slides here. So slide number 1 is the entire graphic and all of its elements. So these elements were created in PowerPoint, and let me just show you how I set it up. So over on the left-hand side are all of the information for each of the points, and I've grouped them into 4 different groups. And those groups are also stacked on top of each other. So all the objects are put into a group, and then the groups on top. So group number 4 is the last point that's displayed in the scrolling list. If I were to turn that off, you can see that directly beneath that is group number 3, 2, 1, and then the final is just a gray box that sits at the bottom. Now each one of these groups are also timed and animated, but the animations are simple. They're just a simple fade out of the current group and a fade in of the new group, and that fade out and fade in sequence is timed to the scrolling action that you're seeing on the right hand side. So over on the right hand side, basically what I have here is, you can see the bounding box. It's one big box of information that has 5 rows of data, and it's all grouped together, and I've just called that scrolling options. And instead of putting in one motion path that just goes up, what I did was I created 3 separate motion paths that were shorter. The height of the motion path is actually the height of this gray box, and I just stacked them on top of each other. So here's the very first one, and you can see over on the animation pane that it scrolls in, and then directly after that, group number 1, the very first point, that does a quick fade out, followed by group number 2, which would be the second point in the list, coming in as a fade in. That's all happening while it's scrolling upward just by one gray box, basically. And then that's repeated 2 more times to create the effect. There's a slight delay with the next one. I have it delayed, you know, you can see the delay 1.25, and then it just repeats the same thing but for the other groups. Now it looks like when you play it back, it's playing it back just in this one little area, and it's scrolling just around this area, but that's an illusion. Let me just show you. I have a top cover and I have a bottom cover above and below this element. And if I were to play back the animation now, you'll see what actually happens. It's moving that entire box upward, but just upward kind of one step at a time using 3 different motion paths, and it's completely exposed. That's why I have the cover in place. That is also why I have the reminder, this gray area, exactly where it is, because if I didn't, and I take the top and the bottom cover off and play the whole thing back, you'll see that the entire thing is exposed as I do that. So that's some little creative workaround there. Anyway, that's how I created the effect. There was some other stuff I did in the slide properties, so I'll do a second screener on that.